He promised me everything, then I got nothing. What if the person you trusted most lied to you with their last breath? My name is Taylor, and I'm from a small town in Iowa. I'm 32 now, but the story I'm about to tell you unraveled in my late 20s. When I learned that love, trust, and blood ties don't always protect you from betrayal. Sometimes they're the very tools people use to break you. My father, Richard, wasn't perfect, but he was my hero. After my mom passed away when I was 15, it was just the two of us for a long time. I helped him run his hardware store, balanced bookkeeping at night, and even skipped college so I could stay close and help him out. He always told me, "Taylor, you've got the brains and the heart. Everything I've built is yours." So I believed him. When he remarried a few years later to a woman named Diane, I tried to be supportive. She had 2 adult sons from a previous marriage, Carter and Luke. They didn't have much of a relationship with Dad, but Diane slowly started bringing them around more. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured she just wanted to blend the families and, hey, Dad deserved happiness, right? But things shifted after Dad got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. It hit fast and it hit hard. I was with him nearly every day, driving him to appointments, sitting by his side when the chemo knocked the wind out of him, helping him get through the nights when the pain was so bad he couldn't sleep. Meanwhile, Diane and her sons were strangely absent. They'd show up just enough to remind everyone they were family, but it was clear who was actually there. Dad kept telling me he had everything handled, that the will was already in place, that I'd be protected, that I didn't have to worry. So when he passed away, I was devastated, but I also felt secure, grief-stricken but not panicked. I trusted what he told me. I didn't expect what came next. At the reading of the will, the lawyer looked uncomfortable. Diane sat there smugly, her sons on either side. When he opened the folder, I noticed it wasn't the same copy of the will my dad had shown me a year earlier. I asked about it. That's when the lawyer said, "Your father made amendments shortly before his death. This is the most recent version." In that moment, everything fell apart. Diane got the house, Carter got the store, Luke got the truck and remaining assets. And me? I got nothing. Not one single cent. Not even a letter. I couldn't breathe. I just kept thinking, this had to be a mistake. But it wasn't. And that's when I realized. They rewrote the will. But I was going to rewrite the ending. I was erased like I meant nothing. What do you do when your own father's promises vanish into thin air and no one else seems to care? I walked out of that lawyer's office numb. The woman I'd tried so hard to accept into our lives had somehow replaced me in my father's final decisions. And her sons, who barely knew my dad, were now living off everything I helped him build. I didn't even get the photo albums. I drove back home in silence, replaying every conversation with my dad. I knew him. I knew how meticulous he was. He wouldn't just forget me. Something wasn't right. The last time we talked about the will, he even showed me a notarized copy where I was listed as the primary heir. It wasn't about money. It was about respect. About being seen. And I'd been erased, like I never mattered. The days after the funeral were a blur. I stayed quiet, partly from shock, partly from shame. No one wants to admit they were cut out. Friends offered sympathy, but they didn't understand the betrayal. My own extended family, my aunt, my cousins, they all kept saying, maybe he just wanted to be fair to everyone. Fair would have been acknowledging the daughter who wiped his mouth when he couldn't eat, who held his hand while he cried. Meanwhile, Diane was redecorating the house and Carter had the audacity to rename the hardware store. From Richard's Tools to Carter & Co., like my dad was a blip on the radar. Like I never existed. But here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just hurt. It wakes you up. I pulled out my old journals, the ones where I had documented Dad's health journey, his emotional state, the appointments I took him to, even the medications he was on. I had phone logs, text messages, photos of us reviewing the will at his kitchen table, and then I remembered something even more important. A voicemail from 3 weeks before he died. He was groggy, but his words were clear. "Taylor, I want you to know the will is still the same. Don't let anyone change that." I stared at my phone, chills running down my spine. That wasn't just love. That was proof. It meant the will they read at the lawyer's office wasn't just amended. It was rewritten. And now I was going to find out how and why. Before I go further, if you've ever felt like the black sheep in your own family or been left behind when you were the one who cared the most, drop a comment and tell me your story. And if you want to follow how this all unfolds, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Because this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a fight I never saw coming. The will wasn't just changed, it was forged. What if the last legal document your father signed wasn't real at all? I spent that night staring at the ceiling, clutching my phone with that voicemail. His voice, so tired, so certain, kept echoing in my head. Don't let anyone change that. Dad didn't change the will, someone else did. And that meant only one thing: forgery. I started digging, slowly at first. I didn't want to believe Diane, who once cried in my arms when Dad got diagnosed, could be that calculating. But grief has a way of stripping away illusions. And the more I looked, the more things didn't add up. The lawyer who read the new will, he wasn't the same attorney Dad had used for years. When I called Dad's original lawyer, Mr. Peterman, his receptionist said he had retired 3 months ago and wasn't taking client meetings anymore. That alone wasn't suspicious, until I asked about Dad's most recent file. She paused, then said, "There's a gap. The file ends 2 weeks before your father passed. There's no update on record." That's odd. Odd didn't even begin to cover it. I asked her if she had a scanned copy of the original will. She emailed it to me, and just like I remembered, it clearly named me as the sole beneficiary. Dad had even left a small trust fund for the local library in Mom's memory. That will was heartfelt, detailed. The new will? Cold, generic, and conveniently updated only days before Dad died, when he could barely speak or hold a pen. That's when I drove to the county clerk's office to pull the signature page from the will Diane submitted. When they handed me a copy, my stomach dropped. I knew my father's signature. That wasn't it. It looked close, sure, but too perfect, like someone had traced it, or worse, digitally copied it. It was missing the slight shake he developed near the end. And then the final piece clicked. The witness signatures. I recognized one of the names. Luke's college buddy. The other? A notary who'd been under investigation for misconduct last year. I felt a rush of heat and nausea. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a setup. They thought I wouldn't notice, that I'd grieve and move on. But they underestimated me. That night I made a decision. I wasn't just going to mourn my dad, I was going to defend him. Protect what he stood for, what he built. And I wasn't going to do it alone. I called a friend from college who had just made partner at a law firm in Des Moines. She specialized in probate disputes. When I told her everything, she didn't hesitate. "This isn't just suspicious," she said. "If we can prove forgery, we can take this to court. And if we win, you won't just get what was originally yours, you could press charges." I finally felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. They didn't just betray me, they committed a crime. What happens when you discover your family didn't just cut you out, they broke the law to do it? The moment my friend Rachel, now attorney Rachel Green, told me we had a case, something in me shifted. For the first time since my father's funeral, I felt grounded. I wasn't just grieving anymore, I was gearing up for battle. We started with the basics, preserving evidence. I backed up every voicemail, text, and email from Dad. I organized my photos and printed copies of the original will. Rachel took everything and filed an official motion to contest the will that Diane submitted. That alone caused a stir. 3 days later, I got a knock at my door. It was Carter. He showed up like nothing had happened, with some fake grin and a, "Let's not turn this into a thing, Taylor." A thing? I stared at him. "You mean the part where you stole everything our father worked for and thought I'd roll over and let it happen?" He shrugged. "Look, Mom was just trying to keep things fair." I cut him off. Fair would have been not forging a dying man's signature. His face changed. His jaw tightened. That's when I knew. They were nervous. Rachel explained that most forged wills don't hold up under scrutiny, especially when medical records show the deceased wasn't mentally competent. And I had plenty of evidence that Dad was incoherent in his final week. There was no way he could have understood or signed anything. We also subpoenaed the notary and witnesses. That's when things got tense. Luke's college buddy cracked first. He admitted he wasn't sure if my dad actually signed the document. The notary stopped responding entirely, which wasn't a great look considering her past misconduct. Still, this wasn't a slam dunk. Diane had hired her own legal team, a slick firm from Chicago, and they came in fast, trying to settle quietly. They offered me a small payout in the interest of moving forward. It felt insulting, but it also told me one thing. They were scared of what I knew, and I wasn't backing down. I wasn't settling for silence, not after the sleepless nights, not after watching the house I grew up in being redecorated with Diane's fake farmhouse chic. This was more than a legal fight, it was about restoring truth, about defending my dad's honor. He didn't raise me to be passive, he raised me to be strong. And now I had the tools, the evidence, and the legal firepower to take them down. Before we dive into what happened in court, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Drop your story in the comments, I read every single one. And if this is resonating with you, please like and subscribe. It helps more people see these stories and it helps others know they're not alone. Court was their wake-up call and my turning point. What if the only way to get justice was to drag your family into court? By the time our court date arrived, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The betrayal had hardened into resolve. Diane, Carter, and Luke sat across the courtroom from me, dressed in black like they were attending a funeral. Maybe they thought they were burying my chances. They had no idea. Rachel walked in like a storm in heels. She came prepared, with documented timelines, medical reports, character witnesses, and 2 major bombs, handwriting analysis and my father's voicemail. We started with the basics. Rachel laid out a timeline showing my dad's rapid physical and cognitive decline. The hospice nurse even submitted a statement confirming that during the week the new will was supposedly signed, Dad could barely hold a fork, let alone sign a legal document. Then came the handwriting expert. She testified that the signature on the updated will was inconsistent with Richard's known handwriting samples, not just different, artificially produced. She pointed out the uniform pressure, lack of natural tremor, and pixel anomalies suggesting a possible digital scan and trace. Diane's lawyer objected, of course, but the judge allowed it. And then, Rachel played the voicemail. It was scratchy, weak, and short, but clear enough to hear. "Taylor, I want you to know the will is still the same. Don't let anyone change that." I saw Diane flinch. Carter looked down. Luke turned red. That was the moment I felt it, that subtle shift in the courtroom when everyone realized something wasn't right. Their lawyer tried to paint me as emotional and estranged, but Rachel countered with photos of me caring for Dad, receipts from pharmacy runs, and signed logs from hospital visits. My relationship with my father wasn't just emotional, it was documented. Then came the kicker. The witness to the new will, Luke's college buddy, was subpoenaed. Under oath, he admitted Diane had pressured him to sign. He said he never saw my dad actually sign the document, he just assumed it had already been done. Game over. The judge looked furious. He called a recess and requested a full forensic audit of the will and the notary involved. Rachel leaned over and whispered, "We just cracked it open. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just sat there, staring at the woman who married my father and thought she could erase me. She thought she could take everything and walk away clean. But I was rewriting the ending, and we were only halfway through. She finally slipped, and I caught everything. What if the person who betrayed you thought she was untouchable, until she made one fatal mistake? After the courtroom bombshell, things started unraveling fast. The judge didn't immediately rule in my favor, but he did issue an injunction to freeze all estate assets. Diane couldn't touch a thing. Carter couldn't keep collecting profits from the store. Luke? Well, he'd already sold my dad's truck, but karma doesn't forget. For the first time, they were on the defensive. The probate court ordered a full investigation into the will's legitimacy, and when they subpoenaed Diane's email records, that's when things got ugly. There was an email from Diane to a friend. Subject line: need to make sure the new will looks real. That's not paraphrasing. That's exact wording. I remember sitting with Rachel when she opened that file. She let out this slow breath and said, "This just went from civil to criminal." The moment that evidence was submitted to the court, Dion's lawyers started backpedaling. They tried to enter a settlement again, this time a bigger one. Half the estate, full ownership of the store, the house. I could have taken it. I could have walked away with more than enough. But I didn't want a deal. I wanted the truth. So I said no. That same week, the notary finally responded to the subpoena, but not to deny anything. She confessed. She admitted she never saw my father sign the updated will. Diane had brought the document in already signed, and she notarized it without confirming anything. She said she did it because Diane seemed so sure it was what Richard wanted. It was what she wanted. And now the lies were crumbling all around her. I could have danced in the parking lot. But instead I went home, sat in my driveway, and let myself finally cry. Not because I was sad, but because I was finally seen. Not as someone to erase. Not as someone to pity, but as my father's daughter. And just when I thought I couldn't be surprised again, Rachel called me with something that floored me. "Taylor," she said, "your dad had a safety deposit box. It wasn't in the estate records Diane gave us, but I found the reference in an old credit report. You need to go there, now." My hands were shaking as I signed the papers and opened the box the next morning. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name on it, and the first line of the letter read, "If you're reading this, they went through with it. But I trust you to make things right." He knew. He saw it coming. And he trusted me to rewrite the ending. If this story has hit a nerve, if you've ever felt cut out or silenced, leave a comment and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Like, subscribe, and stick around, because justice is almost here. He left me the real will and a message I'll never forget. What if your father knew they'd betray you and left behind the one thing that could save you? When I opened that envelope from the safety deposit box, I expected maybe a personal note, maybe instructions, but I didn't expect what I actually found. A copy of the original will, signed and notarized, dated 2 months before Dad passed. Identical to the one he'd shown me at his kitchen table. My name listed as the sole heir, the house, the store, the truck, everything. And it wasn't just a copy. It had a second page with a handwritten note at the bottom that read, "This is the truth. If anything ever happens to me, trust your gut. I know you'll do what's right." My hands were shaking. I felt like I was holding a piece of him again. His handwriting, his intent, his love. Rachel submitted the new evidence within the hour. It was the final nail in Diane's coffin. The court ordered a handwriting comparison between the will in the box and the one Diane submitted. The conclusion was damning. One was real, one was fake. The judge didn't waste time. Diane was officially removed as executor of the estate. Her son's claims were revoked. The amended will was deemed fraudulent, and the estate, my father's estate, was returned to its rightful heir, me. But the judge didn't stop there. He referred Diane and the notary for criminal investigation. Luke and Carter weren't charged, but their reputations in town were scorched. Turns out, people don't like opportunists who manipulate a dying man's final wishes. And it felt like justice, but it also felt heavy. Because while I won, nothing could bring Dad back. The betrayal still left scars. I still had to drive past the hardware store he built, now mine again. And remember, the months I thought I'd lost it all. So I made a choice. I renamed the store. Not Taylor's Tools. Not Richard and Daughter. I called it Legacy Hardware. Because that's what this was about. Not revenge, not money, not even proving a point. It was about protecting the truth, preserving my dad's legacy, and reclaiming mine. I'll be honest. Some days I still feel the sting of what happened. The silence from Diane's side of the family. The way people look at me in town. Some with sympathy, others with quiet guilt. But I hold my head high because I fought for what was right. I stood up when they expected me to stay down. And I rewrote the ending to a story they tried to erase. They rewrote the will, but I reclaimed the truth. What do you do when they try to erase you from your own story? You pick up the pen and finish it yourself. The weeks after the ruling were surreal. Word spread fast through our small town in Iowa. Some people reached out in quiet support, others avoided me completely. But I didn't care about the whispers or the sideways glances. I had cleared my father's name. I had stood up for myself. And I had won. I reopened the hardware store under its new name, Legacy Hardware, on a rainy Monday morning. I half expected no one to show up. But they did. Customers from Dad's old days, people who remembered my mom, neighbors who had heard what Diane tried to pull and said, "Good for you, Taylor. You did what needed to be done." One woman came in holding a small toolbox. She looked about my dad's age. She smiled at me and said, "Your father once helped me fix my fence for free after a storm. Said it wasn't about the money. It was about being there for people." That's the man they tried to rewrite out of the story. But I kept him in it. And I kept me in it, too. There were hard days. Seeing Carter in town still stings. Diane ended up moving away and Luke quietly enrolled in a grad program out of state. None of them ever apologized. But their silence said everything. Guilt doesn't always come with an admission. Sometimes it comes with avoidance. I kept every document, every voicemail, every court transcript. Not for revenge, but as a reminder. A reminder that I didn't imagine it, that I wasn't overreacting, that I wasn't crazy. I was right. And now, when I sit behind the counter of Legacy Hardware, I see more than tools and lumber. I see resilience. I see integrity. I see the strength it took to stand up and say, "No, you don't get to erase me." To anyone out there who's been betrayed by family, especially over money or inheritance or power, please hear me. You're not alone. You're not weak for being hurt. You're not dramatic for seeking justice. And you're not wrong for fighting for the truth. Sometimes, doing the right thing makes you the villain in someone else's story. But it makes you the hero in your own. They rewrote the will, but I rewrote the ending. Now it's your turn. Have you ever been cut out or betrayed by someone you trusted? Share your story in the comments. Let's make sure these stories are heard. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if you believe in standing up for yourself, even when it's hard. Because in the end, the truth always finds a way back home.